What's up, Taiwan? I'm Rik Glauert with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Taiwan's power supply, or lack of it, is in the spotlight after a series of blackouts in the north of the country left millions without electricity this week. And while there is a lot of frustration, there also appears to be no solutions in sight. John Van Trieste reports.
In the dark again. Taoyuan, a city of over 2 million, has seen several days of blackouts. The biggest left over 100,000 households without power. Taiwan's power supply is generally stable, but the grid is sensitive, and large outages do sometimes happen. Among the more recent was this blackout, which hit parts of Taipei just over a year ago. People are feeling frustrated.
This
time, the trouble began Monday with the shutdown of 4 generators. But it didn't stop there. There were 7 cuts affecting different parts of Taoyuan City in northern Taiwan between Tuesday and Thursday. At one point, reserve power fell to 3%, well below the minimum 6% threshold set by the government. Taiwan's state-run power company had to get big industrial customers to cut back consumption by abruptly raising prices for them. But some officials say most of the problems over the past few days don't have to do with generation or supply. Instead, they say aging lines, fallen trees, and issues with power distribution are the issue. Taoyuan's opposition Kuomintang mayor agrees, and he blames the central government, headed by the ruling Democratic Progressive Party.
上会的能源政策有问题，让台电的财务不健全，让它整个系统维护的这个整个基础设施都没有办法做到位。
Though the incoming Lai Ching-te administration's cabinet won't take office for over a month, there's already pressure on the incoming economy minister to fix these problems. But so far, he's not announced a detailed plan.
综合这些意见，从我们台湾是不是缺电？那台湾可能要多少电，才能够满足这个产业的需求？我希望我在上任以后有一套比较好、比较完整的这个报告，来向各位做一个详细的这个说明。
His comments give little indication about when Taiwan's blackouts might stop. Devin Tsai and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Another 5 new members of Taiwan's cabinet have been announced. They'll head the country's social welfare initiatives. Tiffany Wong has the details.
Incoming President Lai Ching-te's team just announced another new 5 ministers along the theme of togetherness. They'll be in charge of the country's diversity and welfare initiatives.
台湾正面临到非常多元变化的局势。 极端气候、疫情肆虐后的经济复苏、劳资关系的和谐，以及对于少数优质文化的保存，这都需要国人的团结。
Premier-designate Zhou Rongcai announced He Peishan as Labor Minister, making her the 2nd woman to join the incoming cabinet. He previously served as Deputy Secretary General of the Executive Yuan and will now navigate a tough role managing Taiwan's talent retention and new migrant labor agreements with countries like India. Zhou also announced the picks for Council of Indigenous Affairs, Zheng Zhiyong, who currently serves as Director of the Indigenous Cultural Development Center in that ministry. He'll be in charge of continuing initiatives to promote Taiwan's diversity and protection of indigenous cultures that started during Tsai Ing-wen's presidency. Zhou also announced the ministers for Environmental Protection Agency, Health and Welfare, as well as Hakka Affairs. Now there are officially 3 women on Lai's cabinet so far, and there are still more announcements to be made. All eyes will be turning to the highly anticipated National Security Team, including Foreign Minister, National Security Chief, and Defense Minister. Kama Shi and Tiffany Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Health officials say that over 30% of shops that sell tobacco products don't check IDs. That figure emerged after government staff went undercover. They wore high school uniforms and tried to buy cigarettes from shops across the country. Their investigation revealed that over 40% of betel nut stalls failed to check IDs, followed by general stores, convenience stores, and large grocery stores. Under the new tobacco hazard law, merchants could face fines of up to around $7,700 for selling to people under 20 years old. A memorial has been held for a judge whose suicide has raised the alarm about stress and overwork in the judiciary. Rhys Ayres was at the event in Taipei.
Outside this court in Taipei, hundreds of white flowers are being laid to mourn the death of a judge. 38-year-old Rik Glauert worked at a local court here in Shulin District.
我们没有发现灿烂的阳光背后竟然是如此的疲累，没来得及提供肩膀和拥抱，和你一起擦泪水。
On April 12th, Lee's body was found outside his dormitory building, having taken his own life, after apparently telling his wife, also a judge, that he was feeling extremely overworked. Lee's death has sparked outrage and calls for reform among legal workers, a protest they're calling the White Flower Movement, who say judges across Taiwan are inundated with an unmanageable number of cases.
我们把原有的法官名额调去做行政职。 然后工作分配又不均，然后就回过头来讲说，我们人数太少。
Fingers are pointing at Taiwan's judicial authorities. There are claims that poor administration practices are to blame, and that there's pressure on judges to take on more cases than they can handle if they want to progress in their careers. The judiciary has responded, offering support for struggling staff and saying they recognize an issue exists.
我们除了跟法官们感同身受以外，也深切地感受到法官们对司法院改善措施的这个深切的期待。我们希望可以再次突破总员额法，我们也会朝向这个延长办案期限，放宽相关的管考规定。
As sadness turns to anger, the legal community says that now is the time for change. Eason Chen and Rhys Ayres in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
If you're in Taiwan and are having thoughts about suicide, please call 1995 for help. Iran fired air defences at a major airbase early on Friday morning. That's as the military spotted drones near the city of Isfahan. Israel has not taken responsibility for the attack, but the strike threatens to push the region deeper into conflict. Iran on Sunday launched an unprecedented attack on Israel in retaliation for what it believes was an Israeli airstrike on Iran's consulate in Syria. The head of the FBI says Chinese hackers have infiltrated US infrastructure and are waiting for the right moment to launch an attack. According to Christopher Wray, the hacking campaign called Volt Typhoon has gained access to American telecommunications, energy and water companies with a plan to, quote, wreak havoc and induce panic. Wray says the hacking campaign is aligned with China's broader intent to deter the US from defending Taiwan. Beijing says Volt Typhoon is unrelated to the government and that the US is using it as a tool to frame China. The US has vetoed a Security Council resolution that would admit Palestine as a UN member state.
This vote does not reflect opposition to Palestinian statehood, but instead is an acknowledgement that it will only come from direct negotiations between the parties.
The US says that negotiations between Israeli and Palestinian authorities should decide the terms for a Palestinian state rather than UN action. It was the only council member to vote against the resolution, with 12 in favour and 2 abstaining. The UN General Assembly granted the State of Palestine non-member observer status in 2012. But to be considered for full membership, they would need at least 9 votes of 15 and avoid a veto in the Security Council. This bid for Palestinian statehood comes 6 months into the war in Gaza and amid growing Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has raised concerns with European counterparts at the G7 summit in Italy over China's support for Russian defense capabilities. It comes ahead of a planned visit by Blinken to China next week, where he is likely to discuss the issue with Chinese officials. The US has continued to warn China not to provide military assistance to Russia, including in a phone call between US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping earlier this month. Washington says Beijing gave Moscow more than $600 million worth of machine tools in the last quarter of 2023. NASA is heading to the moon, but not the one most people see every night. It's part of a mission to find livable conditions outside of Earth, which could be key to the question, are we alone in the cosmos? Joyce Zheng has more.
sealed in a clean room in California, NASA's new $5 billion space probe called Europa Clipper. It's the largest spacecraft NASA has ever built for a planetary mission and is due to launch in October with the goal of finding conditions that could sustain life here, Europa, one of dozens of moons orbiting Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system.
We have a 5.5-year trajectory that goes from Kennedy in Florida to Jupiter. Once we arrive, it's about 6 months to get into a harmonious orbit with Europa, and then 4 years for our primary science mission. So 10 years of flight once we launch.
NASA expects Clipper to reach Europa's orbit by 2031. It will then study a moon that has tantalized scientists for decades. Since the 1970s, they have suspected its icy outer shell hid a liquid water ocean beneath. Today, scientists say Europa could have double the amount of water of all of Earth's oceans, and the moon is one of the most promising places in the solar system to look for extraterrestrial life.
One of the fundamental questions that NASA wants to understand is, are we alone in the cosmos? If we were to find the conditions for life, then that would say, hey, in our own solar system, there are 2 examples of life, Earth and Europa.
NASA says that if life could form in 2 places in our solar system, then it's likely to exist across our galaxy and beyond. But this latest probe doesn't have the tools to test for life itself on Europa. And project leaders say that's not the goal of the mission. This mission is focused on finding out whether Europa could sustain life. There won't be any little green men floating in Europa's oceans, but the discovery of anything living there at all would open a whole new chapter in space exploration. John Su and Joyce Sen for TaiwanPlus.
Pingdong County in southern Taiwan is celebrating the start of tuna season after local fishers caught the first bluefin of the year. The catch is estimated to weigh at least 250 kilograms. The boat's captain has worked in the industry for 3 decades, but this is the first time he's caught the Pingdong County's prestigious first tuna of the season. The tuna will be auctioned off on Sunday. Scientists are getting to know a little more about the life cycle of pufferfish after researchers successfully bred them for the first time in Taiwan. Maddie Anstrather has more.
This pair of baby long-spine porcupine fish are the newest arrivals at a marine museum in Taiwan, the result of the country's first successful attempt to breed them artificially. While the longspine is the most common type of pufferfish in northern Taiwan, its offspring have remained somewhat of a mystery to researchers. That is, until now.
从来没看过它的那个小的个体哈，那我们看到当它进到家去的话，通常它的体型就已经比较大了哈。那这次就是很难得，我们刚好有机会记录到、收集到它的受精卵，然后从孵化的第1天开始，我们就一直观察它整个的变化。
Now the museum can observe the baby pufferfish. They're learning all sorts of surprising things.
原本以为就是这些河豚，它们应该是很贪吃，因为长大的河豚都非常的贪吃，什么都吃。那在饲养的过程中，竟然就发现这些小宝宝它们非常的挑食。
Out of the 2,000 eggs the researchers began with, only 20 hatched, and the 2 strongest specimens are on show to the public. And although they may look harmless at first, the pair seem to enjoy showing off their strength every once in a while.
它在遇到危险的时候，它会想办法让自己胀大，让水灌到身体里面，然后胀大。
The fish can swell to twice or 3 times their original size, causing their spikes to stick out and scaring off potential predators. The fish began to develop this impressive ability at just 14 days old, making even these babies a force not to be puffed at. Ryan Wu and Maddie Anstrather for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Before we go, check out these once stranded otter pups learning how to survive from their surrogate mums at an aquarium in California. I'm Rik Glauert, take care and we will see you next time.